joining me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jo Southall. I am an independent occupational therapist, specializing in like self-management strategies and things primarily. I do also live with hypermobile EDS, POTS, and assortment of other things. Um, I will forewarn you, I'm in the midst of a really horrendous pain flare and my brain fog has been not good. So if I start talking absolute gibberish, please bear with me. Most of you are probably fluent in brain fog, so I'm hoping we can muddle through. This session is being recorded, but it is just my face on the screen. But if you want to change your names or anything, please feel free. You can send your questions via the chat, pop them in the chat, either yeah, direct to me or just generally in the chat. I do have some pre-asked questions, so I'm going to make a start with those, but feel free to pop your things in the chat as we go. What I will do is muddle my way through in the order they come up in, basically. So please feel free to start doing that, and I will just get up my pre-asked question. Do you have any advice re neck braces for when muscles are feeling irritated to give them a break? Short period only for pain management to avoid deconditioning. I know my wrist splints were very helpful for that and wondered if the same applies for other joints. Okay, so I'm going to go into the theory a little bit around splinting to start with, and then we'll talk about neck stuff specifically. So, generally speaking, a lot of healthcare professionals see splints and braces as something very scary and best avoided because as soon as you put one on, you will immediately decondition and you'll never move safely again. Um, I very much go the opposite direction, but splints and braces need to be used sensibly. So if you were to have an unstable wrist, you pop a wrist brace on, you leave it on for all of your activities for 6 months. Yes, you will definitely decondition. You will lose tone, your body will become dependent on that splint. However, there are ways in which splinting can be really effective. So what we're talking about is activity splinting primarily. So activity splinting is less about, behold my hypermobile wrist, I must brace it, and more about, I have a hypermobile wrist. What am I doing with that wrist? And is there a risk of injury? If so, let's apply a wrist brace. So if I am watching TV and not using my arms for anything besides picking up the occasional snack, I don't need to be in wrist braces. If I am lifting a large saucepan full of boiling water, that's a different scenario. That actually is a very sensible time to be in wrist braces. So what we're looking to do is to basically risk assess what you're doing and work out, is the risk of deconditioning greater or lesser than the risk of getting injured from like doing the thing, basically. Sometimes we're talking about injury as in like subluxation, dislocation. Other times, what we're talking about are just like your body is working so hard to hold you together that all of your muscles have got really angry about it and are throwing an enormous temper tantrum, which is kind of, I think, what we're getting at with this question. So, splinting in general, the other reason we think about splinting sometimes is in order to support joints that are injured or weak to allow for recovery. So, we've probably all been there, done that, where you get an injury and then you start making some progress, go back to your normal life, and then immediately re injure yourself. So, your recovery path, rather than kind of looking like this, looks a little bit more roller coastery with a series of repeat injuries in it. So if you're in that situation where you are repeatedly getting injured or repeatedly having these setbacks, supporting your joints effectively during that recovery period can be really, really effective. And it can also be really effective, particularly when paired with some kind of rehabilitative approach. So neck-based stuff generally responds quite well to physiotherapy. It's a very you have to be very careful with it, but it is a manageable thing. So a lot of the muscles here in your upper back, your neck, the base of your skull, even in like your jaw and your face are very much interconnected. And getting those to function effectively together can be kind of trained in with a little bit of physio, basically. So supporting either for risk prevention stuff, as an example, if I have recently had a neck injury or if I'm planning on sleeping while I'm a passenger in a car, I always wear a neck brace. Because the risk to me of being rear-ended in a moving vehicle or in some kind of collision or even just an emergency stop is higher than the risk of deconditioning when I wouldn't have been doing anything anyway. But that doesn't mean I'm going to keep the brace on when I arrive at my destination. I'll take it off, I'll go on with my life. So if you can work out what the activities are that are contributing to your lack of recovery or your increase in pain, bracing for those is very sensible. So, in terms of which braces to go for, I would always recommend going via an orthotist, and this is particularly true for neck bracing. So, if you think about the structures that are in your neck, you've got the main circulatory supply to your brain. You've got the tubes you breathe through, all of your voice box, all of those really important, scary blood vessels, and all of the nervous system that carries messages from your brain to the rest of your body. This is not an area where we want to be messing around with like subpar equipment, basically. So, what I would say is get yourself referred to NHS orthotics, assuming you're in the UK. If you're one of our international viewers, finding an orthotist privately is a good idea, or at least finding somebody who has a vague ability to like fit you for a neck brace. If you look around kind of on the online circuit, like craniocervical instability type support groups, there are a few braces that pop up. They aren't really like better or worse than each other, particularly. The important bit is how well does that product fit your body? So you could spend £1,000 on a brace, but if anatomically it does not fit you well, it's going to be worse than useless. Whereas if you happen to be the percentage of the population that has exactly the right length of neck to wear a soft foam collar for 4.99 from a pharmacy, great. Do you know? So what I would say is this isn't really something where I would recommend just buying a product off the internet. What I would say, get fitted, get measured. If you're going for something adjustable, take it with you, get somebody to show you how to adjust it. What should you be looking for in terms of fit? How is it supposed to feel? All those kinds of things. Just because there are so many really important things here that we don't want to be squashing. So I guess that's probably sort of half answered the question. Yeah, Miami and Aspen are normally the higher end ones, but they're also quite expensive. Um, Miami, I actually think in the UK you can't just buy, particularly the one that I've got, you can't buy it. You have to be like referred to buy it by a healthcare professional. So um, basically, yeah, if you're in the UK, go via an orthotist. Explain that you've talked about activity splinting, explain that it's not going to be for full-time use, it is just to give your body a bit of a rest or to protect you from certain activities that have a high incidence of injury or pain flare-up or something else. You are more likely to get a positive response if you are actively undergoing some kind of rehab or you plan to undergo some kind of rehab soon. So getting yourself referred to physiotherapy or something similar would also be a really sensible one to do. So I hope that kind of sort of helps. If you are not in a position to find yourself an orthotist and you would like more specific advice, please feel free to drop me a message and we can do it in an appointment, but I can't give anything more specific than that in like a generic advicey scenario. So I hope that helps. Let me scroll down. With weather getting cooler, pain is increasing. Any tips for dealing with pain, mostly joint pain in colder months? Oh, I'm so right there with you. Yeah, worst pain flare in ages. So the things that I would say are firstly just general advice around symptom management, particularly pain management. A lot of us will be quite drastically impacted by changes in seasons and changes in weather. Equally, a lot of the time, we're kind of given prescriptions or strategies or whatever, and we just expect them to work uniformly and consistently for the entirety of the year. That's not really how it works. if you are the sort of person whose health varies dependent on like changing seasonal factors, if that makes sense. So, one of the things I would say is actually having separate coping strategies, separate flare-up plans, separate clothing, separate medication, separate anything. If your symptoms change between one season and the next, literally having a swap over time where you just say to yourself, okay, I'm in cold weather mode now, can actually be really, really useful. So, okay, cold weather mode now. Um, it is difficult this time of year because we can go from being it feeling like autumn and then kind of being back to summer again. The other thing that goes along with the cold weather, cooler weather, is low barometric pressure. So this time of year is really, really common to have a lot of rainy, stormy kind of weather. Low air pressure, barometric pressure, uh, tends to happen before rainstorms. And it means that a lot of people who are sensitive to barometric pressure, the human barometers of the world, such as presumably most of us, are going to experience pain because of it. So if the air is physically supporting your body less, it kind of is a lesser version of when you feel great in the pool and then you get out onto dry land and it feels like your entire body is too heavy and you're falling apart. It's kind of that. So one of the things I get people to look at in terms of pain management is trying to work out what's actually causing the pain. Is it the air pressure? Is it the temperature? Is it something else? Is it hormonal? Is it whatever? If we know what's causing a flare up, we can more effectively select a task that will help manage it. So, low air pressure, which is what has hit most people at the moment, I suspect, typically adding strategies for pain management that are high pressure can be really effective. So, compression clothing, getting in a water, in a bath, particularly like saltwatery, magnesium bath, and things like weighted blankets, even really, really tight hugs, or just having pets lay on top of you. If you have pets, don't like steal people's pets specifically for pressure therapy. But like all that kind of stuff will help with the low air pressure related pain. Things like kinesiology tape, compression gloves, all that kind of stuff, again, are helping to address the root cause of that pain flare up. So if the cold weather is the thing that's causing the pain, what we need to do is adjust or address the fact that you're cold. So I'm a massive fan of merino wool thermals and compression gloves, wrist warmers, all that kind of stuff. Microwavable hot water bottles are an absolute game changer, particularly for people that don't feel safe pouring from a kettle. I would definitely, definitely recommend those. You can also start thinking about actually like, is it worth just having the temperature in your house set a little bit higher? Will it, if it will cost you more, but you're more functional, financially it's worth it. You know, we make compromises for things like that. Compression clothing does have a benefit of, generally speaking, retaining heat as well, which can be quite useful. Colder weather pain, a lot of people find that in cold weather, getting going in the morning is really, really difficult, particularly if you've like seized up, kind of like, yeah, T-Rex arms, church mouse poses, all the classics. Um, if you are struggling with that, factoring more time into your day to start the day with a hot shower or even just wrapping yourself in a warm, like thing, walls, electric, thank you. Electric blankets can be really, really useful. Electric heat pads, again. You can even get electric foot like slipper things, plug-in foot warmers. Battery pack operated gloves are a thing. My dad actually has like a gilet body warmer thing he wears for golf that has a battery pack in it, and it's just got heating elements that run the whole way up the back and front. And I'm insanely jealous, and I kind of want one. But that kind of thing can be really effective at addressing the cold weather as well. One of the things to be aware of is that for those of us who've got some kind of autonomic dysfunction, the cold weather brings an additional challenge in that we bundle up loads because we get cold very, very quickly. But when you get back in somewhere warm, you immediately overheat. So As an example, if I've been out and I've been for a walk in the cold and I'm wearing 1,000 layers when I leave the house, as I get back towards the house, so at the start of the end of my road, I will start taking off like a scarf. I'll unzip my jacket. I might take off my gloves and put them in my pocket, that kind of thing. So that when I get to the house, I can really quickly and effectively like shed all of my warm clothing. And I will always do that sat on the stairs or sat on the floor. So sometimes like the warming strategies are really effective for pain management, but they massively mess with your autonomic system. So trying to find that balance is quite a difficult thing to do. Having people around you who are informed about what your strategies are supposed to be is really, really useful, particularly if you end up with flare-up related brain fog and you're kind of sat there going, I don't really know what to do with myself. Is it summer? Is it winter? Physically having a printout is a really nice reminder, but it will also let other people know how they can help you in the event that you're having a really, really tough time, but also verbal communication is not working for you at present. Someone in the comments has just said turtle doves, fingerless gloves. Yeah, love those. Sign up to the mailing list because they occasionally do like really good special offers. Snoods, yeah, definitely. Basically anything. What I find is that I really want my peripheral body bundled up loads, and I want the central part of my body quite cool still. So like arm warmers and gloves and like knee-high socks, absolutely love them. Anything like that is brilliant, particularly if you're into like fiber crafty stuff, because the fidgeting of making you warm clothes also keeps your circulation going. Yeah, love it. Okie dokie. Let me just check my messages. Where? Sorry, chat's moved on while I was rabbiting on again. Will my double jaw joint replacement, January the 28th, cause neck and shoulder pain still? I wish I could give you an answer to that. I don't think I can. Um, one of the difficulties with any surgery for hypermobile people is that we are more likely to have negative outcomes and typically recover slower. What I can say is that the state in which you are in when you go into any kind of like potentially traumatic scenario does have an impact on how well you come through it. So if you are going into something where they're basically going to be beating you up in order to accomplish something that effectively feels better, but eventually, right? If you're going into that, having as an example, like massage work or a load of physiotherapy or a load of deep tissue, like myofascial release stuff, to get your pain in your like neck and shoulders as minimal as possible before they start doing the kind of major face tinkering, will probably help with the immediate recovery thing. It's worth having a discussion about what your rehabilitation and recovery looks like with your team before they actually do anything to you. So I'm presuming you know who the surgical team are, or you've got at least a vague idea of who to get in touch with regarding the surgery, given that January isn't really all that far away. Um, oh no, 20 this year. Oh, so it's already been done. Double jaw brain fog. The first bit of that sentence still applies. Ignore the last bit unless you're actually having surgery again and I've misunderstood. Um, Essentially, I don't know. Without knowing a lot more about your history and without getting a physiotherapist to have a full assessment of that, it's really, really difficult to say. Um, One thing you could do is to actually kind of I don't know what the follow-up has been like, basically. So have you kind of seen anyone since then, that sort of thing? Um, Pain clinic might be a useful like group to touch base with regards to that. Um, yeah, it's a really difficult one. Um, the other issue is that a lot of kind of jaw-related surgery, particularly on hypermobile people, is fairly new territory. We've not been doing a massive amount of that type of surgery on people for a very long time compared to some other surgeries that we've been doing for decades, kind of thing. So essentially, I don't know. I'm really sorry. That's not a very useful answer at all. If you are struggling with pain, pain clinic referral would be a sensible thing to look into. Equally, kind of very deliberately, like reminding yourself regularly to relax is a sensible thing to do. So carrying any kind of tension, particularly in an area that's had like a traumatic thing back in January, learning to physically deliberately relax yourself is a useful thing to do. Yeah, if in doubt, go back to your surgical team, I think is the best I can offer there. Sorry. I am on the lookout constantly for some kind of jaw physio TMJ specialist that I can wrangle into coming onto a live stream, but I have not been successful in locating one yet. But I am still looking, so bear with me on that one. Um, Link Fairy, spot on for the neck issues. Travel pillows are a really good thing. Travel pillows worn backwards, even better. So you have the bit that should be here in front of you, and then you can rest your chin on it while you're doing stuff, which is really handy. Um, oh, Bronya. That surgery sounds intense. I wouldn't be surprised if you were still struggling, and I hope they can get you some support from that. Okay. This is quite a long question. Bear with me for a sec. Okay, so this person is talking about hyperextension, particularly related to knees and legs in general. Um, Severe hyperextension in this case, and what they've been doing is using basically wraps to um, support and stabilize that a little bit. Works in the short time, but actually can cause pain to get worse quicker and to get more intense. And they're wondering if there's anything else they could use as the wraps are kind of causing their joints to not like it really. Um, okay, so let's get in with the anatomy a little bit, the kind of how this works. If you are hyperextending a joint, what tends to happen is that when that joint is hyperextended to the maximum range, um, it's kind of like locking your joints in place. And when you do that, you don't actually have to use your muscles in order to stay upright. So this is the same technique horses use to sleep upright. They basically just lock their joints in place and then doze off. It's the bendy person equivalent of that. So if you are locking your joints in place so that you don't kind of have to use your muscles effectively, you're not fatiguing your muscles, you're not like getting them to work hard. So it saves an awful lot of energy. However, long term, it does wear and tear type damage to the joint surfaces. It encourages hyperextension and it doesn't do you any favors in terms of actually building muscle. So if you get a wrap or a support or a something that encourages your knees to not bend backwards, you're no longer able to lock your knees in place, which means you now have to use your muscles to accomplish the job of standing upright. So when you're stood upright and you're using your muscles, or when you're walking and you're using your muscles, what you're then starting to do is fatigue your muscles much quicker. So um, although it's preventing that longer term damage, you are going to be experiencing more pain quicker because you're actually working your body quite a lot harder. So, what I would strongly suggest is getting yourself a referral to an NHS orthotist. I've been reliably informed we will hopefully have an orthotist joining us in a few months' time. I have immediately forgotten the running order of my next few guests. But yeah, there should be an orthotist at some point soon. So it would be a good one to bring back for that. But with orthotics, what we can look at are compression garments. So if you give me a second, I will reach into my box of miscellaneous items. Um, okay, so these are just an example. But what you can get from three companies in the UK now. So there's DM Orthotics, Job Skin, who trade under something else, but I can't remember what it is, um, and Allard UK are making custom-made compression garments. So this is a very old pair I keep just for demonstration purposes. So the dark blue here is a single layer of Lycra. The light blue is a reinforcement layer placed on top of that. And you can see, like on the side of my hips, as an example, there's an extra layer on top of that. So what this kind of garment does is basically encourage your body to stay in the right places, to move in the right ways. But it doesn't block you from actually accomplishing the hypermobile type positions. So once you are kind of supported and encouraged to be in the right place, you can then start to build muscle. So this isn't really like it's not like a one step kind of rehab process. Step one would be getting the compression garments. Step two is then getting quite a lot of physiotherapy support to actually train your muscles to do what they're supposed to do. So when I was about 23, maybe no younger than that. Anyway, a long time ago, went to whilst being assessed by a physio, was basically told that my butt muscles don't actually do anything. So I'd been accomplishing something that looked like walking, but wasn't technically done the right way for my entire adult life and my entire childhood. Now, that then meant that I had to relearn which muscles I was supposed to be using, which in the short term made walking a heck of a lot harder. It required vast amounts of concentration and made muscles that I didn't even know I had work really, really hard. So the short-term outcome of that was that my walking was harder work, slower, and caused more pain. The long-term benefit of that is that I now use a slightly better combination of muscles to vaguely achieve walking. And it's actually drastically improved my hip stability because I've now got muscle where previously there was just laziness. So this isn't going to be a quick fix. What you're going to need is that combined approach of encouraging your body to work the way it's supposed to, but also deliberately building muscle in the areas where you currently don't really have any. So it's going to be quite hard work. Quite a lot of us, I've started calling it cheat exercising. There's probably a technical term for it somewhere. Experts, if any of you know one, fill me in. But basically, it's really, really common for hypermobile people to present as mostly functional, as in if you watch us walk across a room, it looks like you're walking right. But when you actually start laying hands on things, you realize that we're using entirely the wrong muscle groups to accomplish that. The downside to this, amongst many other downsides to this, is that when you put things in place that force you to kind of correct that, sometimes the correction is too much. So sometimes what we need to do is make like half an adjustment, get used to that, and then adjust the other half. So something like shoe inserts that would really encourage you to not hyperextend your knees, but also support your ankles in a different way might drastically change how you walk, but if it's a huge adjustment, you might not tolerate that. So adjusting halfway and then doing the other half when you've got used to the first adjustment can sometimes be a better way of doing things. But it is a difficult process and it's not something that I would recommend just doing on your own. Um, I would strongly suggest self-referring to physiotherapy. If you pop in physiotherapy self-referral, you can, generally speaking, find your local service, fill in their online contact form, and they will triage you and get back to you. You can then speak to your GP about a referral to NHS orthotics for splinting, specifically lycra suit splinting, because I think that's going to be a really good option longer term. I have tried all of the brands now, I think, in some format or another. But that style of splinting is consistently the thing I come back to time and time again that's proven really effective for me. You can also, if you need to, wear slightly more rigid braces over the top of that. So if you had like a full length set of leggings, you could then put an e-brace on top to really, really block hyperextension. But I suspect if you have been walking this way your entire life, that's going to be too much too soon. And you'll be in the same situation you were talking about to start with, where actually walking correctly causes you quite a lot of pain. So yeah, hopefully some of that is useful or at least informative. Um, yeah, physiotherapy and orthotics, definitely my advice there. So glad I'm not the only one who baffles physios with how are you moving without even using close to the right muscles. Yeah. Oh, excuse me, just knocking things on the floor. Um, yeah, it's a really, really common thing. And I think it's part of what contributes to a lot of us getting quite severe post-exertional symptom escalation from exercise. So basically, show of hands in the comments, as it were, how many of you have ever done some exercise and thought, wow, I feel pretty good right now? And then the next day, you feel kind of okay and you think you've got away with it. And then 12 hours later, after that, it feels like you've been hit by a bus. Because that tends to be the way it goes. Yeah, a few people. Um, yeah, that tends to be what happens with a lot of us. And I think it's because you firstly don't have the kind of body awareness. Literally everyone in the comments now. I'm sorry, all of you. Oh, it sucks. Um, yeah, what I think it's a contributing factor to the whole kind of micro macro trauma type situation. So if you have fragile tissues and low muscle tone and a high possibility of injury for various reasons, but you also have this kind of delayed onset type situation, if you are doing exercise that makes your body work hard, particularly if it's working hard in ways that it doesn't normally, the poor body awareness type situation means that we don't necessarily notice itty bitty little like teensy weensy injuries, except if you're doing, say, an hour in the gym and you get, say, 50 teensy weensy little injuries. And then the inflammation really starts to kind of ramp up and the adrenaline wears off and the lactic acid kicks in. Sort of 48 hours later, you're really in like a massive amount of pain. So yeah, it kind of causes a lot of problems from that perspective, but equally like us looking like we're not as deconditioned as we actually are, what you may find is that you're physically, technically capable of doing quite a hard exercise, but you shouldn't be because you don't actually have the foundational movements that contribute to that exercise right. So if we look at yoga as an example, I think the reason why a lot of people really, really struggle with yoga and stretching in general as a hypermobile person is that we go too hard too fast. We go too far into it because what you should be doing in yoga is using your muscles to pull yourself into stretches. Yeah. What we do is settle into them, like flop, like gravity is doing 90% of the work, and we just relax into it, which means that you're not actually using the bits of your body you're supposed to be using. You're just kind of overstretching all those hyperextendy places. And the poor proprioception means that it doesn't even feel like a stretch when actually you're overstretching. So if you do a series of stretches and it doesn't feel like you're doing anything, hold it for a little bit longer and then just try tensing a muscle. Because generally, if you've turned off your muscles and you're not paying attention to them and then you start stretching, you can get into these fantastic contortions and shapes and things. But actually, if you're using your muscles while you stretch, it feels completely different. And you then realize that you don't need to push into that anywhere near as far as you had been because you are actually getting a stretch. You're just kind of not aware of it because of the whole proprioceptive sensory processing ridiculousness that it is being hypermobile. Link Fairy is spot on in the chat as well. You are so much better off doing 5 reps perfectly than 20 badly. And this is something that I train all of my physio students in as well, is that actually towards the end of a set is when you start to get injured because you get overconfident. You think, oh, I've got the hang of this now. I can do this movement. I'm feeling pretty good. Off we go. And the less attention you pay to that exercise, the worse you do it. The more you cheat by accident, the more you won't notice that kind of thing. So, um, starting with much, much easier exercises, but training them to the point where you can do them without even thinking about it before you start to escalate that is a really, really good thing. And then teeny tiny little variations that slightly change how much muscle you're using in certain directions can have a huge impact. Or you start to add kind of instability in, so like wobble cushions or, that kind of thing, or walking on uneven surfaces versus walking on a solid surface. These kinds of variations can be really, really like impactful. So, um, yeah, it's just an interesting couple of thoughts there in terms of physio stuff as well. Another really, really random little kind of, it almost feels like a life hack. Um, Hypermobile people, there's a subset of hypermobile people who weirdly do very, very well with a small heel on shoes. And we're not talking like tap shoes kind of thing. We're talking like brogues with just like the tiny little, yeah. But like a really firmly structured shoe with a slight heel forces you to use your butt muscles when most of us don't. And if you're using your butt muscles and you're tilted by the heel, it encourages you to not hyperextend your knees. So, really weirdly, like there's a certain pair of brogues, and I've got them in like 4 colors now because I can walk better in those shoes than I can in any other pair of shoes that I've ever owned. To the point where my partner laughs at me and my magic shoe collection because they just work. Um, so yeah, having a look at what you're wearing. Are there certain shoes? Is there a certain heel height that works really, really well for you? What muscles are you actually using? And when it comes to activities, are you concentrating on your walking or are you trying to multitask slash being distracted? So if I am walking, just walking on my own with no distractions and minimal things to carry, I can walk further and I will be less injured. Whereas if I know I have to go somewhere busy or I'm with friends or I have to carry something, I will now go in my wheelchair more often than not because I know I cannot concentrate to the extent that is required for me to do that task safely. So things like mobility aids might also be a strong consideration here in terms of injury management and pain management as well. Okay. Yeah, follow-up statement about being flat-footed. Definitely brogues, weirdly, is a good thing to look into, but also a podiatry referral. So starting from the feet up is actually a really, really good approach to things. But don't be surprised if changing something like insoles drastically causes a pain flare to start with. If you're getting new insoles, I would genuinely recommend an hour in them at absolute most the first day. And that's an hour doing very, very minimal walking. Build your way up over the course of, say, 2 weeks whilst pottering around the house all day. And then make sure you're really comfortable doing that before you even attempt to do like a day out or a day at work on your feet, that kind of thing. Um, yeah, more heel is often advised for plantar fasciitis too. Oh, thanks, Link Fairy. Lovely. Okay. Do we have, and I think I've got to the end of the questions. No questions at all. Anything else? Doesn't even have to be a question because it's quite a small crowd tonight. Oh, there's one came through immediately. Going through a phase of shoulder subluxing very easily, would shoulder splint help for a few days? Quite possibly. So this would be the thing, what's the word? Situation, I don't know. This the thing I was talking about earlier, where if you've like destabilized something and you're getting recurrently injured, having basically some kind of support to just keep things where they belong so that it can calm down is actually a really, really good thing to try. Um, I've had this from quite a few different professionals for different bits of my body, actually, where if something is at the point where you've just completely destabilized it and it just keeps falling out of joint, stick it back in, leave it there. But that doesn't mean don't move that body part for, say, 4 or 5 days. It is really, really important to still mobilize at least a little bit. So, I had a shoulder, I think it may even have been last time I was live streaming or a couple of weeks ago or something. I had a shoulder injury, and I put myself in a sling for like 3 days, but I kept taking it off. And the reason I kept taking it off was so I could do very, very gentle, very kind of slow, controlled movements. Firstly, to keep my circulation going. Secondly, so I didn't seize up. And thirdly, as an assessment of how unstable it still felt. Um, that movement was really, really helpful. But actually being immobilized in situations where I was distracted or where I kept trying to reach for things but shouldn't have been reaching for things because my arm fell off, um, really, really useful to like stop me from re-injuring it when I wasn't concentrating. So, yeah, definitely a sensible thing. And it may be that you don't even need it all the time. If you think about which activities are happening or which positions you're in when those subluxations are occurring, it may be that there's a strong pattern. So weirdly, for a lot of people, sleep is the most dangerous thing for recurrent shoulder injuries. So if you do find that you've destabilized something massively, sleeping in an elastic shoulder support with a pillow wedged in your armpit can actually be really, really helpful in getting that to calm down. You may find if you are mindful with your movements during the day, you don't need support all of the time, but specific tasks that are contributing to that injury frequency, you can support for those. Yeah, lovely. I hope it settles soon. I mostly walk barefoot, but I'm very flat-footed. I guess it's not such a good idea. Interestingly, I've heard conflicting things about that. Um, Barefoot walking can itself be a form of rehabilitation. So if you think about children, children all have flat feet. They develop arches from walking primarily. Um, so yeah, actually learning to walk barefooted tends to be like a useful thing to do. I personally find I'm either barefoot or in very, very structured supportive shoes. Anything in between is like worse than either of the two options. So I think it's worth having a conversation with a podiatrist about that. Equally, there might be supports that you can use while you're not in shoes. So like elastic ankle supports that go under the kind of arch of your foot might be a thing. You can get elastic supports. You could try kinesiology taping as well as a way to actually have an arch forced into your foot, but still not have to wear shoes. Pretty much in summer, I am, yeah, barefoot crew all the way. But yeah, I think it's worth having that assessed. So if you can see a podiatrist and actually just get them to watch you walk and check whether or not you're actually doing yourself more harm than good. But as a form of rehabilitation, it's been recommended to people I work with to like be barefoot, to walk around barefoot. What I would say is there's a big difference between like mooching walking and walking properly. And I would encourage the walking properly to be like the main kind of walking that we're doing. So being a little bit more aware of like foot placement, which muscles we're using, how your ankles are functioning in that walking step is a good thing to do. I'm hoping that makes a little bit of sense. Um, but yeah, if in doubt, get it checked out. Oh, that rhymes. I must remember that. Um, sorry. Um, Yeah, I think it's worth getting it checked out, but I wouldn't say immediately stop walking barefoot because walking barefoot is actually quite a good thing for a whole variety of different reasons. Proprioceptively as well can be a really, really nice thing. Um, so yeah, considerations, I think. Um, yeah, if you're not focused, if you're distracted, get yourself some supportive shoes for that. And maybe have a think about tape, particularly if you find that your feet are really sore, or if you're doing a lot of walking barefoot, or if you're kind of like um, post-injury or post kind of destabilization type situation. A little bit of taping or strapping or something might give you a kind of hybrid option where you can still be barefoot but with a bit of support. So yeah, good luck with that. Okay. Could I speak generally about learning to pace? Yes. Pacing is my favorite topic. Also not so subtle link dropping hint that I do actually have a pacing masterclass. I teach pacing via video chat. So if you're interested, drop me a message. Um, one of the things with pacing, I think that's particularly important is that pacing is more efficient than pushing through. All too often I hear like, oh, I don't have time to pace, or I just got to keep going, or I'm not going to get this all done. You are not saving yourself any time by pushing through. You just aren't. So the easiest way to get your brain on board with that is to start factoring recovery time into your time estimates. So if I was to push forward with all of the jobs I need to do this evening to get ready for the fact that I'm going away over the weekend, immediately after doing my live stream, I would crash and I would crash hard. And that crash would add maybe a couple of hours to my working time. If after this live stream I lay down for half an hour, play solitaire on my phone, rehydrate, cool down, and then I get up and go, that's half an hour. You know, half an hour break versus 2 hours in complete crash mode some point later in the evening. Pacing just makes common sense, right? Like it's a good thing to do. So, because of the aforementioned proprioceptive body awarenessy type stuff, one of the things that tends to happen is that chronically ill people, particularly chronically ill people who are busy or have poor body awareness, get really, really good at completely ignoring everything their bodies try to tell them. So, little niggly, kind of it hurts, but not enough to make me stop type things, we ignore them. That's not a good thing because what we end up doing is ignoring a load of stuff that's actually fixable that we didn't need to be ignoring. So, one of my key pieces of pacing advice is the micro break. So, just stop and take like 10 to 30 seconds to actually think about how are you feeling? Are you in any pain? Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? When was the last time you went to the, you know, kitchen and got a snack? Were you due medication 2 hours ago, but you just keep snoozing the alarm? All that kind of stuff. Particularly for people who are neurodivergent and maybe prone to skipping those signals for things like hunger and thirst. We really, really, really need to be focused on getting that stuff done. So if I am doing a live stream, as an example, and I'm reading a question in my head, while I'm doing that, I might have a sip of drink because I'm taking a few seconds out of that activity that none of you will have noticed to look after myself. So 10 to 30 seconds of just stopping what you're doing and focusing on, are there any things that actually need maintenance work? Do I need medication? Do I need a drink? Do I need whatever? It will add up to be quite beneficial. So if you had a little bit of a niggly headache and you chose to ignore that and persevere with what you were doing, you might firmly land yourself in painkillers and darkened room territory. Whereas if you are taking a little micro break and you think, oh, I've got a bit of a niggly headache, and you stop, get some fresh air, get a drink, get away from your computer screen, 15 minutes later, that's probably gone. You've taken the edge right off. That 15 minutes of recovery time is really, really valuable versus the 2, 3 hours of crash time you would have had to put up with if you pushed through. So learning to tune in with your body is a really, really useful thing to do, particularly in terms of exercise, where we've just mentioned earlier those kind of like micro traumas, little bits of damage that we don't notice. If you're stopping regularly during exercise and recognizing that maybe you need a little bit of a break, and if you're on a bit of a break, what else can you do to look after yourself? You will reduce your chances of ending up in that really horrendous pain flare like 2 days later. So micro breaks are a really, 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 really useful thing to do. I would definitely strongly recommend those. Um, One of the issues with pacing in general, I think, is that with things like micro breaks, sometimes it can feel like the more you pace, the worse you get. I don't think that's the case. What I think is that if you've been in survival mode where you've just been forcing yourself from one task to the next for years and years and years, you don't notice half of the stuff you're struggling with. All you know is that at the end of the day, you didn't have enough energy and you felt awful. Once you start dealing with some of that, you'll notice other little bits. And then those other little bits need dealing with. And then the next thing needs dealing with. And eventually you will run out of stuff in your backlog of problems to deal with. But it can feel kind of never ending at the start. And I think that's a difficult thing to wrap your head around. It doesn't mean you're getting worse. It just means that all of these things were there all along and you've been ignoring them the whole time subconsciously because what else are you supposed to do? But yeah, so I hope that kind of helps a little bit with the pacing stuff. Start with micro breaks, go from there. There is some information on my website about pacing. And I've also done 3 episodes of a podcast called The Rest Room on pacing, in which I give away a frankly ridiculous amount of my pacing masterclass. So if you check out the Rest Room podcast, you should be able to find the pacing episodes. And hopefully that will get you started, but please do feel free to email about that. Masterclass is amazing. Thank you. Barefoot shoes, good or no? Again, very much depends on whether your barefoot walking is good barefoot walking or whether it's twisty ankle barefoot walking, collapsed archy barefoot walking. So try it and see in moderation. But if you can't like walk barefoot safely, barefoot shoes aren't going to work for you. If walking barefoot works brilliantly for you, barefoot shoes will allow you to continue that as you go. So it very much depends on the foot, the ankle, the person, the situation. I do have a pair. I wear them sometimes, and I wear them on the sorts of days where I would have been okay being actually barefoot, but that's not all the time. Sometimes I need to be in really strong, structured, supportive, ankle supporty, immobilizey kind of shoes. So I wouldn't go out and immediately replace your entire collection of shoes with barefoot shoes. You probably need a range of options for different situations and for days where your function has varied slightly. But if in doubt, see a podiatrist. Gait analysis stuff has come a really long way and can be very useful in helping with that. Masterclass is amazing. Thank you so much. Lovely. Okay. Pacing. Thank you, Link Fairy. Been amazing as always. Okay. I am going to call it there because I've got to the end of the questions and it's a good time to stop. Thank you, all of you, very much for coming. I hope this has been a useful session. Thank you for putting up with my slightly muddled thoughts at times. I will be back next month and the month after that and the month after that. In the next 3 episodes, I think, I have amazing special guests who are experts in all kinds of cool things. So please stay tuned for details on the main HMSA page on the website and things as well. There will be somebody from mast cell action, so we can have a nice little chat about mast cell activation and all things kind of mast cell. I've got an orthotist coming in and I've got potentially a hand therapist as well. So there's quite a lot of cool stuff coming up. And then I'm probably going to hassle the wonderful Kim Clayton into joining me at some point as well. Um, so yeah, there's some good stuff coming up. Please stay tuned. It would be great if you could come again. And if you have any questions that you'd like to submit ahead of time, please feel free to either message me or to message the HMSA on Facebook, or you can email HMSA. You can email me hello@jboccupationaltherapy.co.uk. You can find my email via my website, or you can use any of the other, basically any method of getting in touch is fine. Please bear in mind that all of us are chronically ill and tired and respond erratically when broken. So, yeah, send your messages in, but don't expect an immediate reply because our brains are mush. Um, yeah, fabulous. Thank you so much. I hope this has been a good evening, and I'll see you next month. Bye.